I stood in the empty parking space where my brand new Toyota Camry should have been, my hands trembling as I held my phone to my ear. My mother's voice, casual and dismissive, echoed through the speaker like a slap across my face. "Oh, honey, I gave it to Elena. She needed a car for work and you can just take an Uber." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. This wasn't borrowing. This wasn't asking. This was theft. My own mother had stolen my car and handed it to my younger sister like it was a used sweater. The parking lot spun around me as rage, disbelief, and a lifetime of suppressed anger crashed over me like a tsunami. My finger hovered over the screen. I dialed 911. "I need to report a stolen vehicle. The suspect is my mother." If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been taken for granted by the people who were supposed to love you most, hit that like button and subscribe. This story is about to get intense. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members because you're not alone. Let me take you back to where this all started, to the beginning of my 30 years of being the family doormat. My name is Natalie Chen, and I grew up in a modest 2-bedroom house in Aurora, Colorado, just outside Denver. From the moment my sister Elena was born when I was 7, I learned a fundamental truth about my place in the family hierarchy. I was the responsible one, the one who didn't need attention, the one who could take care of herself. Elena was the baby, the fragile one, the one who needed everything. My parents, first-generation immigrants from Taiwan, poured all their dreams and resources into making sure we had opportunities they never had. But somewhere along the way, the distribution became wildly unequal. I got the hand-me-down clothes while Elena got new outfits for school. I worked part-time jobs through high school while Elena's allowance covered her social life. When college application time came, my parents took out a small loan for my state school tuition but somehow found money to send Elena to a private university when her turn came. "You're stronger, Natalie," my mother would say, patting my shoulder with the kind of pride that felt more like a burden. "You don't need as much help." Elena is more sensitive. I believed them. I internalized it. I became exactly what they needed me to be: self-sufficient, uncomplaining, and visible. I threw myself into my studies, graduated with honors in computer science, and landed a job at a growing tech company in Denver. I worked 60-hour weeks, skipped lunches, stayed late, and climbed the ladder rung by painful rung. By the time I turned 30, I was a senior software engineer making 6 figures, living in a decent apartment in Capitol Hill, and finally able to afford something that was truly mine: the 2023 Toyota Camry in silver. It wasn't a luxury car, but it was new, it was reliable, and it was mine. I'd saved for 2 years, researched every model, negotiated the price myself, and drove it off the lot with tears of pride streaming down my face. For the first time in my life, I had something that nobody could take credit for but me. That car represented everything I'd worked for. Every late-night coding session, every skipped vacation, every time I'd said no to drinks with friends because I was saving money. It was my independence, my freedom, my proof that I mattered. 3 months after I bought it, I got the promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years. Senior team lead, with a salary bump that would finally let me start thinking about buying a condo. I spent the morning of that fateful day preparing for my presentation to the executive team, the one that would showcase the new software architecture I'd designed. I checked my car in the parking garage before heading in, running my hand along the smooth silver hood like it was a talisman. That's when I got the first text. Unknown number. Be careful with the things you love, Natalie. Sometimes family is your biggest enemy. I frowned at my phone, assuming it was a wrong number or some spam, and deleted it. I had bigger things to focus on. The presentation went flawlessly. The executives loved it. My boss pulled me aside afterward with a bottle of champagne and the official offer letter. I was flying high, thinking about how I'd worked so hard for this moment, how everything was finally coming together. I practically skipped to the parking garage. The space was empty. At first, I thought I'd forgotten where I parked. I walked up and down the rows, my heels clicking on the concrete, my confidence slowly curdling into confusion. No silver Camry. No car at all in my assigned spot. No broken glass. No signs of struggle. Just an empty rectangle of pavement, and the oil stain that had been there for months. My heart started hammering. I called building security. They pulled up the camera footage. At 10:47 a.m., while I was presenting to the executive team, a woman who looked remarkably like my mother had walked up to my car, used a key to unlock it, and driven away. 15 minutes later, my sister Elena was visible in the passenger seat. I called my mother with shaking hands. "Oh, Natalie, you're being dramatic," she said when I demanded to know where my car was. Her tone was light, almost amused, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over a borrowed toy. Elena needed transportation to her new job. You know she's been struggling since her last position didn't work out. I used the spare key you gave me for emergencies. This is an emergency. She can't afford a car right now, and you have a good job. You can take Uber. It's not that big a deal. Not that big a deal. My voice came out strangled. Mom, that's my car. I bought it with my money. You can't just take it and give it to Elena. Don't be selfish, Natalie. Family shares. You've always had everything so easy. Your sister needs help right now. When did you become so cold and heartless? The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Selfish. Cold. Heartless. The words I'd spent my entire life trying to prove didn't apply to me. I want my car back. Now, we'll discuss this later when you calm down. I'm hanging up now. Elena needs to get to work. The line went dead. I stood there in the parking garage, surrounded by other people's cars, holding my phone and shaking with a rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. 30 years of being the good daughter, the understanding sister, the one who didn't make waves, all came crashing down on me in that moment. I didn't call my mother back. I didn't call Elena. I called the Denver Police Department non-emergency line and reported my vehicle stolen. When they asked for suspect information, I took a deep breath and gave them my mother's name and address. The dispatcher's voice gentled. Ma'am, are you sure you want to file a report against a family member? Sometimes these situations are better handled privately. I'm sure I said, and the words felt like breaking chains. This is theft. I want to press charges. 2 hours later, I sat in a plastic chair at the police station, giving my statement to Officer Maria Ruiz, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much family drama. She listened without judgment as I explained. The situation took down all the details and assured me they'd locate the vehicle. I've handled cases like this before, she said quietly. It's hard when it's family, but you have the right to protect your property and your boundaries. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I was signing the final page of the report when the station doors burst open. My mother, father, and Elena stormed in like an angry mob. My mother's face was twisted with fury I'd never seen directed at me before. She marched straight to me, snatched the papers from Officer Ruiz's desk, and tore them in half. Are you insane? She shrieked. You're trying to put your own sister in jail. Over a car. What kind of monster have you become? My father, usually the calm mediator, looked at me with cold disappointment. Natalie, withdraw the report. We'll handle this as a family. This is not how we do things. Elena stood behind them, her eyes red and puffy, looking simultaneously terrified and defiant. I can't believe you do this to me, Nat. I'm your sister. Officer Ruiz stood up, her hand moving toward her radio. I need everyone to calm down right now. This is a police station, not a family therapy session. Ma'am stepped back from the desk. But I'd found my voice, and it came out stronger than I expected. No, I won't withdraw it. This isn't about handling things as a family. You took my car without permission. That's theft. Elena drove it knowing it was stolen. Those are crimes. The law doesn't care if we're related. My mother lunged at me, and Officer Ruiz intercepted her smoothly, positioning herself between us. That's enough. Everyone not making a statement needs to leave now, or I'll add disturbing the peace to our list of problems today. My father grabbed my mother's arm, pulling her back. The look he gave me was pure ice. You're making a choice here, Natalie. Think very carefully about what you're doing to this family. I already thought about it, I said, and my voice didn't shake at all. I've thought about it for 30 years. Officer Ruiz escorted them out. Elena was taken to a separate room for questioning. I finished my statement and walked out of the station into the bright Colorado afternoon, feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified. My phone started ringing before I even made it to the Uber I'd called. Aunt Linda, Uncle James, my cousin Michael, my mother's book club friends, my father's golf buddies. Everyone had somehow heard about the police report within hours, and everyone had an opinion. How could you do this to your parents after everything they sacrificed for you? Elena is going through a hard time. Can't you be the bigger person? Your mother is crying her eyes out. Are you happy now? This is going to destroy your family. Is a car really worth it? I turned off my phone and sat in my apartment staring at the wall, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The guilt was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should just let it go and keep the peace like I always had. But then I remembered standing in that empty parking space. I remembered my mother's casual dismissal. I remembered 30 years of being told I was strong enough not to need things, that I should understand, that I should sacrifice just a little bit more. I turned my phone back on and blocked every number that had called to shame me. The next morning, Uncle Chen called. He was a successful lawyer, someone I'd always admired and thought understood me. I answered hopefully, thinking maybe he'd be on my side. "Natalie, I'm calling as your uncle, but also as someone who understands the legal system," he said, his voice smooth and reasonable. "If you don't drop these charges, I'm going to make sure you regret it. I have connections at your company. I have friends in the Denver legal community. Your name will be mud. You'll never work in this city again. Is that what you want?" The threat was delivered so calmly, it took me a moment to process it. My uncle, who'd given me birthday cards and advice about college, was threatening to destroy my career because I wouldn't let my sister steal my car. "Are you seriously threatening me right now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to protect you from yourself, and protect this family from scandal. Drop it, Natalie. Last warning." He hung up. I sat on my couch and cried for an hour. Not sad tears, but angry, frustrated, exhausted tears. Tears for the family I thought I had versus the family I actually had. Tears for the little girl who'd tried so hard to be good enough, only to realize good enough was never the goal. The goal was invisible, convenient, available for use. My phone rang again. This time it was Officer Ruiz. "We found your vehicle," she said, "and we have your sister in custody. You need to come down to the impound lot." My hands shook as I took another Uber to the impound facility on the outskirts of Denver. Officer Ruiz met me there, her expression grim. "I want you to be prepared," she said as we walked toward the lot. "It's not in great condition." She wasn't kidding. My beautiful silver Camry looked like it had been through a war zone. The interior was trashed with fast food wrappers, cigarette burns in the upholstery, mysterious stains on the seats. There was a dent in the front bumper and scratches along the passenger side. The new car smell had been replaced with the stench of stale beer and cigarettes. We pulled Elena over for erratic driving. She failed the field sobriety test. Blood alcohol level .12. She was drunk at 2 in the afternoon, Officer Ruiz said quietly. "The charges are more serious now. DUI, possession of a stolen vehicle, reckless endangerment." I stared at the car, my car violated and ruined. A small box had fallen out from under the driver's seat during the impound. Officer Ruiz handed it to me. Inside was a stack of IOUs in my mother's handwriting dating back years. $20 for groceries, $50 for Elena's textbooks, $100 for car repairs. The dates corresponded to times when money had mysteriously disappeared from my purse or my account, times when I thought I was going crazy or just bad at keeping track. And at the bottom of the box was my grandmother's jade necklace, the one she'd given me before she died, the one that had gone missing from my apartment 2 years ago, the one my mother said she'd never seen. All the evidence of a pattern I'd been blind to. Or maybe I'd just been unwilling to see. "I'd like to keep this as evidence," I told Officer Ruiz. She nodded and logged it into evidence storage. The trial took 3 months to arrive. 3 months of escalating harassment, threatening voicemails, and relatives showing up at my apartment to beg, threaten, or guilt me into dropping the charges. 3 months of my mother and father alternating between silent treatment and screaming phone calls. 3 months of my entire extended family treating me like I was the villain in a story where I was supposed to be the victim. I went to therapy. Dr. Sarah Brennan, a specialist in family trauma, helped me understand what healthy boundaries looked like. She had me read books about narcissistic family systems and golden child versus scapegoat dynamics. For the first time in my life, I had language for what I'd experienced. "You're not crazy, doctor," Brennan told me during one session. "You're not selfish. You're not cold. You've been conditioned to believe that your needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. That's not love. That's exploitation." The day of the trial arrived in late September, the kind of crisp autumn day that Denver does best. I wore my best suit, the navy one I saved for important presentations, and walked into the courtroom with Officer Ruiz by my side. My hands were sweating, but my spine was straight. My parents sat in the front row behind Elena and her public defender. They didn't look at me. Elena, dressed in a conservative blouse and skirt that I recognized as borrowed from my mother, looked small and scared. For a moment, I felt the old familiar pull to protect her, to make it all okay. Then I remembered my destroyed car. The IOUs. The necklace. 30 years of being less than. The prosecutor presented the evidence methodically. The security footage of my mother taking the car. Elena's DUI arrest. The property damage. The pattern of financial exploitation documented in the IOUs. Character witnesses testified about my history of responsibility and Elena's history of borrowing things that never got returned. Elena's lawyer tried to paint me as cold and vindictive as someone who'd always been jealous of her younger sister who was using the legal system to punish her family for perceived slights. My parents testified describing me as a difficult child who'd always needed less attention, who'd always been independent to the point of being distant. Elena has struggled, my mother said from the witness stand, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She's not as naturally talented as Natalie. She needs more support. Natalie has always had everything come easily to her. We thought she would understand and want to help her sister. It was such a perfect inversion of reality that I almost laughed. Everything had come easily to me because I'd worked myself to the bone for it. Elena had struggled because she'd never had to face consequences. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my heart pounding. The prosecutor asked me to explain the situation in my own words. I told them everything. Not just about the car, but about the borrowed money that was never repaid, the clothes that disappeared, the times I'd covered Elena's rent when she was between jobs, the constant message that I was strong enough to handle less while she needed more. I presented the IOUs, the necklace, the pattern of taking, without asking of assuming my things were family property while Elena's things were sacred. This isn't about one car, I said, my voice steady and clear. This is about 30 years of being told that my boundaries don't matter, that my property isn't really mine, that my feelings are less important than keeping the peace. This is about being treated as a resource to be used rather than a person to be respected. I loved my family. I love my family. But I can't love them at the expense of loving myself. The courtroom was silent. My mother's face was red with fury. My father looked at the floor. Elena was crying silently. The prosecutor asked, "What do you want the court to understand about this case?" I looked directly at the judge. "I want the court to understand that theft is theft, regardless of who commits it. That family relationships don't erase the need for consent and respect. And that I deserve to have my property, my boundaries, and my autonomy respected just as much as anyone else in this courtroom." The judge, an older woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, regarded me thoughtfully. Then she looked at Elena, at my parents, and back at the evidence. The verdict came after a brief recess. Elena was found guilty of DUI and receiving stolen property. My mother was found guilty of theft and misuse of entrusted property. My father received a lesser charge as an accessory after the fact for helping hide the vehicle initially. Elena received a suspended jail sentence of 6 months, 3 years, probation, mandatory substance abuse, counseling, 200 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay full restitution for the vehicle repairs, cleaning, and diminished value plus damages for my emotional distress. The total came to just over $15,000. My mother received a similar sentence without the DUI components, plus a restraining order that she accepted in lieu of jail time. My father received probation and a fine. When the judge finished reading the sentences, my mother stood up and tried to lunge at me across the courtroom. Officer Ruiz and 2 other officers intercepted her before she could reach me. She was screaming something about ungrateful daughters and destroyed families, but I couldn't make out the exact words over the ringing in my ears. My father grabbed Elena's arm and pulled her toward the exit, his face a mask of cold fury. Elena looked back at me once, her expression a mixture of shock, betrayal, and something that might have been the first glimmer of understanding. I stood there trembling as my lawyer shook my hand and congratulated me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, and strangely free. Officer Ruiz walked me out through a side exit to avoid the press that had gathered. The story had made local news engineer prosecutes own family over stolen vehicle. The headlines made me sound either brave or heartless depending on which outlet you read. "You did the right thing," Officer Ruiz said as we reached my Uber. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I lay in my apartment and stared at the ceiling. My phone was full of messages, half supporting me, half condemning me. I turned it off and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Around midnight, I got up and wrote a long email to the one family member who hadn't been in that courtroom, Grandma Sophia, my father's mother, who lived in a nursing home in Boulder. She was 92 and sharp as ever. I told her everything. Her response came the next morning: "Good girl. About time someone in this family grew a spine. Come visit me soon. I always liked you best." That made me laugh for the first time in months. The year that followed was the hardest and best of my life. I cut off contact with my parents and Elena completely. I blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media. I moved to a better apartment building with secure parking. I got my car fully restored, though. I ended up trading it in for a new model anyway because I couldn't shake the feeling of violation every time I sat in it. I threw myself into therapy and my career with equal intensity. Dr. Brennan helped me understand that healing wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about building a life where I valued myself as much as I'd valued everyone else. At work, I was promoted again. Then again. By the following summer, I was a director of engineering overseeing a team of 40 people. I bought a condo in Cherry Creek, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Denver skyline. I bought a new car, a luxury SUV that felt almost decadent. I started dating someone who actually respected my time and boundaries. I made new friends who saw me as a whole person, not just a support system. And I started a nonprofit called Boundaries, an organization that provided resources and support for people dealing with financial exploitation by family members. It turned out there were thousands of people like me, people who'd been taught that setting boundaries with family was selfish, people who needed permission to choose themselves. The nonprofit got local press coverage, then regional, then national. I was interviewed on podcasts, quoted in articles, invited to speak at conferences. My story became a rallying cry for people who'd been told they were wrong to prioritize their own well-being over family obligation. One evening, about 18 months after the trial, I attended a charity gala that my company was sponsoring. I arrived in a designer dress, my new partner on my arm, confident and happy in a way I'd never imagined possible. I was making my way through the crowd when I spotted someone familiar at the catering station, carrying a tray of champagne glasses. Elena. She was fulfilling her community service hours at the event. Our eyes met across the room. She went pale, nearly dropped the tray, and quickly looked away. I watched her for a moment, noting the shame in her shoulders, the way she kept her head down. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, pity, anger, sadness, and something close to indifference. I walked past her without saying a word. There was nothing left to say. Later that month, I stopped at a King Soopers to pick up groceries. I was in the produce section deciding between apples when I saw them. My parents. My father was wearing a grocery store vest stocking shelves. My mother was at a register. They'd both aged more than 18 months should account for. My father's hair had gone almost entirely gray. My mother looked smaller, diminished somehow. They saw me at the same time I saw them. I was dressed in my usual work clothes, expensive but understated, carrying a basket with organic produce and artisan bread. I'd come from my office in my luxury SUV, probably had a dinner meeting scheduled for later that evening with my nonprofit board. We stared at each other for a long moment. I saw the recognition in their eyes, followed by something I'd never seen before, shame. Maybe regret. They saw what I'd become without them. They saw what I'd built after they'd tried to tear me down. I could have said something cruel. Part of me wanted to. But instead I just nodded politely, the way you might acknowledge a stranger, and walked to a different checkout line. The real triumph came 3 months later. I was named one of Denver Business Journal's 40 Under 40, an annual list of young professionals making an impact. The article featured a full-page spread with my photo and an interview about my career trajectory and my nonprofit work. In the interview, I talked about the importance of self-advocacy and boundary setting. I spoke about how sometimes the people who should support you the most are the ones who hold you back. I discussed the courage it takes to choose yourself when everyone is telling you that choosing yourself is selfish. I didn't name my family specifically, but anyone who knew the story would understand exactly what I was referencing. The magazine hit newsstands on a Thursday. By Friday, my office had received over 100 emails from people sharing their own stories of family exploitation and thanking me for speaking out. My nonprofit's donation page crashed from the traffic. 3 different publishers reached out about book deals. That weekend, Grandma Sophia called me from her nursing home. "I saw the article, dear. Your parents saw it too. The whole nursing home is talking about it." I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. "How are they doing?" I asked, not sure why I cared, but unable to stop myself from asking. "Miserable," she said cheerfully. "Exactly as they deserve. They lost a brilliant daughter because they were too foolish to see her value. That's on them, not you." A few months later, I made one last gesture. My nonprofit had grown large enough to host an annual gala, a major fundraising event with silent auctions, celebrity speakers, and significant media coverage. We held it at the Denver Botanic Gardens on a perfect spring evening. I was giving the keynote speech to over 500 attendees, major donors, local politicians, and press. I talked about the mission of boundaries, about the thousands of people we'd helped, about the importance of financial literacy and self-advocacy. During the reception afterward, as I mingled with donors and posed for photos, I noticed 3 familiar faces at the edges of the crowd. My parents and Elena dressed in the catering staff uniforms, serving hors d'oeuvres and champagne as part of Elena's ongoing community service, and my parents' part-time work to make ends meet. Elena was offering a tray of shrimp cocktail to a city councilwoman I'd been talking to. The councilwoman was telling me about her own experience with a financially abusive ex-husband, how my organization had helped her sister, how important this work was. Elena stood there, holding the tray, forced to watch me receive praise and admiration from powerful people. Forced to serve me in a way at my own event, celebrating my success. Our eyes met. I saw everything in that look: humiliation, resentment, and maybe finally a hint of understanding about what she'd taken from me. What she'd helped take from me. I smiled at her. Not cruelly, not kindly. Just a simple acknowledgement that I saw her and I was unmoved. Then I turned back to the councilwoman and continued our conversation, dismissing Elena as thoroughly as my family had dismissed my needs for 30 years. 6 months after that, I did something I never expected. I bought a house. A real house, not a condo. A beautiful craftsman bungalow in Wash Park with a front porch, a backyard, and a garage for my car. A place that was entirely mine, that no one could take from me or claim they deserved more than I did. I threw a housewarming party and invited everyone who mattered in my new life: my partner, my friends from work, my therapy group, people from the nonprofit Officer Ruiz, even Dr. Brennan. Grandma Sophia came in a wheelchair driven by a nurse from her facility. We celebrated in my backyard under string lights, drinking wine and eating food I'd catered because I could afford to, because I'd earned it, because I deserved nice things. Late in the evening, after most guests had left, I sat on my back porch with Grandma Sophia. She held my hand with her papery thin fingers and smiled at me. "You did it, sweetheart. You broke free." I did, I agreed. "It was harder than I thought it would be. The best things usually are." She squeezed my hand. "Your parents called me last week. They wanted me to talk to you to see if you'd consider reconciliation." My stomach tightened. "What did you tell them?" I told them that you're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. That they made their choices and now they're living with the consequences. That maybe if they'd treated you like a daughter instead of a bank account, things would be different. She smiled wickedly. "I don't think they'll be asking me to mediate again." I laughed, feeling the last bit of guilt dissolve. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, kiddo. And I'm so damn proud of who you've become." Now, 2 years after that day in the parking garage, I wake up every morning in my own house. I drive my own car that no one else has keys to. I work at a job I love, leading a team that respects me. I run a nonprofit that's helped thousands of people set boundaries and reclaim their lives. I have a partner who would never dream of taking something of mine without asking, who treats my possessions and my autonomy as sacred. I still see my parents sometimes from a distance. Denver is a big city, but not that big. I saw my father at a restaurant last month bussing tables. He looked at me, started to say something, then thought better of it and turned away. I felt nothing but a distant pity. Elena reached out 6 months ago through a mutual friend asking if we could talk. I declined. I'm not interested in reconciliation or closure. I'm interested in peace, and peace for me means absence of people who treated me as less than. My mother sent a letter to my office last Christmas. I didn't open it. My assistant asked if I wanted her to trash it or return it. I told her to trash it. Whatever my mother had to say, I didn't need to hear it. She'd had 30 years to treat me with respect, and she'd chosen not to. I wasn't giving her another opportunity. People sometimes ask me if I regret it, if I miss my family, if I think I overreacted. The answer is no to all three. I regret the years I wasted trying to be enough for people who would never see me as enough. I miss the family I thought I had, not the family I actually had. And I didn't overreact. I reacted appropriately to people who stole from me, manipulated me, and expected me to smile and say thank you. Last month, I was invited to speak at a TED conference about family dynamics and financial boundaries. Standing on that stage, looking out at thousands of faces, I told my story. Not for revenge, not for validation, but because somewhere in that audience was another Natalie, another person being slowly drained by people who claimed to love them, and maybe my story would give them permission to choose themselves. The talk went viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of family exploitation and the courage it took to break free. My nonprofit's funding tripled. My parents' friends started sending them the video, probably as some kind of intervention, probably making them face what they'd lost. I don't know how they felt about it, and I don't care. That's the real victory, I think. Not that they're suffering. Not that they're sorry. But that their feelings no longer determine mine. That I'm free. This morning I drove up to Mount Evans, one of Colorado's 14ers that you can drive to the summit. I stood at the overlook, 14,000 feet above sea level, looking down at Denver, spread out below like a glittering promise. The air was thin and cold and perfect. My phone rang. Grandma Sofia. "How's the view up there?" she asked. She always knew when I needed mountain time. "Perfect," I said. "Everything is perfect. You've really found yourself, haven't you?" "I think I have." "Finally. Good. That's all I ever wanted for you. To see your own worth." We talked for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. I stood there a while longer, watching the sun move across the sky, casting shadows that changed the landscape moment by moment. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed she had to shrink herself to fit into a family that didn't value her. I thought about the woman I'd become, the one who'd chosen herself even when it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. I thought about all the people my nonprofit had helped, all the families that were healthier because someone finally learned to say no. They say blood is thicker than water. But I've learned that respect runs deeper than any blood tie. That love without respect isn't love at all. That family is supposed to lift you up, not hold you down. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your worth. I drove down the mountain as the sun set behind me, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. My house was waiting. My life was waiting. A future I'd built from scratch on my own terms, with no one to answer to but myself. And I've never been happier. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself? Have you ever been the one who's supposed to understand, supposed to sacrifice, supposed to be strong enough not to need what everyone else gets freely? Have you ever had to walk away from people who claimed to love you but never showed it through their actions? Drop a comment and share your story. Hit that like button if you believe that self-respect is more important than family obligation. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who chose themselves and never looked back. Because here's the truth, nobody wants to say out loud you don't owe anyone your peace of mind. Not your parents. Not your siblings. Not anyone. Your boundaries aren't negotiable. Your property isn't communal. Your life isn't a resource for other people to mine. And the moment you truly understand that, that's when you're finally free.